Hi, and welcome to this Key Center Food for Thought presentation on study skills. Before we get started, please take out a sheet of paper to create a chart like the one to the right, with a column for each class, current study skills for that class, how those skills are working, and finally a column for changes that we can make. All right, a quick self-check before we get started with the presentation. So, think about the classes that you're taking this semester. What study skills are you using for each class? Go ahead and jot those down in the first column of your paper. Next, for each class, think about which skills are working and which are not, and go ahead and write that down in the next column of the paper. All right, so today, let's review some different strategies that we can use to help us study more effectively. The study skills that we'll be discussing today are taking care of yourself, going to class, whether it's an in-person class or a virtual class, reading the textbook and other materials, taking notes, using organizational tools, making time to study, seeking help, and trying something different when things aren't working out the way you'd like them to. First off, take care of yourself. Be sure and get plenty of sleep. Lack of sleep impairs mental functioning, memory, and even your health. We all know what it's like trying to concentrate in class when we haven't gotten a good night's rest. So, getting plenty of sleep can definitely help make it easier to focus and concentrate on learning and remembering the things that are important. Eating healthy is another good tip. It helps avoid blood sugar drops or spikes, which can make it hard to focus. Sometimes it's easy to get so caught up in studying that you spend hours and hours and forget to do everything else. But if you're not feeding your mind and body properly, it's going to be hard to study effectively. Exercise is another good way to take care of yourself. It helps relieve stress, helps you clear your mind. And it doesn't have to be anything too extreme. Just taking a short walk can help with clearing your mind and making it easier to come back and study more effectively. Going to class is also very important. There's no replacement for being physically present in class or for actually viewing the presentations that your professor might have for you online. When you're attending class or lectures, stay engaged and focused. It can often help to take notes to keep your mind listening for things that are important and jotting them down. Just make sure you don't get too distracted with the notes and that you're still paying attention to what your professor is saying. Recordings are also a helpful tool. Some professors allow you to record their lectures, so you'll be able to listen to them again later. And if you're taking an online class, your lectures will probably be posted as videos that you can view again later as well. So that's another good way to review. If, however, you absolutely must miss a class, it's best to notify your professor before, if possible. And they can often work with you to make sure you don't fall too far behind, or help you find a way to make up anything you might miss. Classmates are also helpful. If you have some reliable friends in the class that can help you with any work you might miss or information, that'll be important. Reading the textbook and other materials is also another good step. Use active reading. Pay attention to how the information is organized, for instance, the headings. That will help you see how it all fits together in the big picture. Consider taking notes as you read. Ask yourself questions about what you're reading and try to make connections with other things you're already familiar with. The better you can connect to your reading, the better and easier it will be to remember it. Regarding notes, try to put them in your own words. Writing things out word for word like in a textbook doesn't really ensure that you're understanding what it says, right? So if you're able to put things in your own words in a way that makes sense to you, that's a better way to make sure that you're writing things down in a way that will make sense. And be sure to take breaks when you're reading. It won't do any good to force yourself to continue reading when you're past the point of being able to focus. So if you've read a whole paragraph and you don't really remember what it was even about, it's probably time for a break. And hopefully when you come back, your mind will be able to focus again and retain more of what you're reading. All right, we kind of touched on this a little bit about taking notes during lectures and while you're reading. So again, this helps you to stay actively engaged in your learning. It also helps you pay attention to things that are important, such as key words or concepts, relationships between concepts, and particularly during lectures, information that your professor might hint will be important. It also may be helpful for you to consider writing notes by hand. This often makes it easier to remember what you've written, and it also makes it easier to add diagrams and illustrations as well to help show how different ideas are connected. Another good tip is to use organizational tools. Binders can be really helpful. Sometimes it's easy to just throw everything together in your backpack and run off to the next class, but if you take the time to put things into binders or some other way to organize it, it'll make it easier to find things later. And it'll also make it easier to travel with things because they won't be able to fall out as easily or get squished or anything like that. So organizing things in a binder of some sort can be a really good tool. Planners are also helpful, especially with managing your time. Because we all have responsibilities like our family, our classes, work, and things like that. So planners can help us balance out the needs of each of those and also help with remembering things like due dates and when assignments are due and when tests are and things like that. Color coding can also be helpful. You could color code each class with a different color, or you could color code your notes for a class. For instance, highlighting uh, important dates with yellow or important people with green and things like that. There are folders, post-its, highlighters, pens, markers, lots of different ways of color coding. And you can even come by the Key Center if you need some folders or highlighters or anything like that. Making time to study is also very important. Sometimes it feels like it's unavoidable, but if possible, try not to cram everything in at the last minute. It's best to study your schedule time and spread it out so that you'll be able to remember it better over the long term. Right? So cramming might get you through a quiz or a test, but by the time the final comes around, that information will probably be gone. So it's better to spread out your spread out your study time so that way it'll be easier to remember it over the long term. Also, often in textbooks, there are practice or review questions at the end of the unit or chapter. If possible, try to work those. They help reinforce the most important concepts. They allow you to test your understanding, and that way you can find any areas that you might need to review or clarify. So even though it might take a little extra time, it'll pay off when test time comes around because you'll be able to see which parts you're struggling with and prepare for them ahead of time. Seeking help is another good tip. One of the best places to turn to is your instructors. The ones that have the instructions and the expectations laid out for you for the class. And if you're not understanding what exactly they are, you can definitely talk with them and help clarify what it is that they want. They'll also work with you under special circumstances in many cases. So if you're struggling, turn to the professor and see if they're giving advice or see how they can work with you. Classmates are also a good place to turn to for help. They provide peer support, and they can also make good study partners or study groups. So if you enjoy working with others to study, definitely consider getting together some classmates for a study group. Tutors are also helpful. They can help clarify concepts and introduce you to new study skills or organizational strategies. Right? And there's also counselors, advisors, and other support staff for you more specialized assistance if you're feeling especially overwhelmed. So if you're struggling, don't be afraid to turn to someone for help. Finally, try something different. What works in one situation may not work as well in another. The way you study for technical classes, like a math or science class, will probably be different than the way you study for a non-technical class like English or history. So for instance, in math, flashcards may not work as well. You probably want to focus on understanding the steps for solving a problem or remembering formulas. But for a class like English or history, flashcards may be more useful, or how to analyze materials. So different strategies for different classes are always helpful. And even for different professors, because each professor has their own expectations. So you'll probably have to for that as well. If the way you're studying isn't getting you the results you desire, don't be afraid to try something new. All right, so let's close out with a check again. So looking back at your classes this semester and how you've been studying, right? So that paper that we started at the beginning of this, do you need to change the way you're studying for any of your classes? How can you change the way that you study? So go ahead in that last and jot down some of the changes that you think you'd like to make in the way that you study for each class. And remember some of the skills we talked about today: taking care of yourself, going to class, textbook and other materials, taking notes, using organizational tools, making time to study, seeking help, and trying something different. Thank you all for attending today. I hope that some of these study skills will be helpful for you.